Jordan Ellis here for LowKickMMA. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Keelin McNamara, and we're going to go through 2021. It's been a brilliant year for the UFC, for MMA, and for the fans. You know, we've had some great fights and some great moments. So we're going to get stuck into them. And what be doing today, we'll be going through categories and picking our winners, giving some honourable mentions, and then we'll be going through the champions and seeing how we think they might line up for 2022. So first off, welcome Keelin. Great to have you. How are you feeling?
Yeah, mate, I'm great. Thank you very much for having me for such a special episode. As you said, it's been an unbelievable year for 2021, been a great year for the UFC, and I'm really excited to see what you've got for these categories. I think we're going to agree on some. I have a feeling we might disagree on some, but I'm really excited. Let's get straight into it.
Okay, so first off, I think there's a pretty easy one, nice one we should agree on to get this started. Fight of the year. We recently, over the last few days, been releasing our LowKickMMA writer awards, and Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler was pretty much unanimously voted by everyone as the best fight of the year. Absolute bomb bearer of a fight. It was Justin Gaethje. You know, he just seems to be in these fights every year. That's my fight of the year. Do you agree with me on that one?
Yeah, this is probably the least surprising pick out of any of our categories. It was Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler. Very few ways you could argue with it, even if you could find someone who somehow did want to argue with it. Like you said, absolute firecracker from start to end. And the only thing that was wrong with this fight was that it wasn't 5 rounds. And that tells you how good that fight was. Absolute insanity. One of the best fights that I've ever seen. I'd actually really love to give an honorable mention to a fight that doesn't get mentioned as much as it should, and that's Merab Dvalishvili and Marlon Moraes. I think with 2021, this is a fight that's gotten overlooked a little bit more than it should have, but this fight was unbelievable. That first round, Marlon Moraes had Dvalishvili dead and buried, and then second round, he came out. Dvalishvili came out, put the pressure on, almost gassed Moraes out, and then got the finish. So definitely Chandler Gaethje for me, but just a little honorable mention for the bantamweight division there as well. But as you said, Jordan, we were pretty much unanimous in this, and it was very hard to argue. Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, fight of the year.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of from that bantamweight division as well. I think both of Corey Sandhagen's fights this year have been brilliant fights. It's first against TJ Dillashaw and then against Peter Yan. You know, in terms of high level MMA, they've just been, you know, such a treat to watch them for me, especially. And I'm sure Sandhagen's feeling a bit disheartened, you know, coming off 2 losses, but you know, he put on such a show and they were brilliant fights. So yeah, wants to mention them. I don't think anything gets quite close to Chandler Gaethje, but you know, definitely deserved the mention. There's probably a few we're missing as well.
Yeah, I really like those. Corey Sandhagen is one of my favorite fighters out of any division, and he's one of the only fighters who could technically lose 2 fights and his stock goes up from them. So if Corey Sandhagen does feel like that, I can promise you he shouldn't be, because I think he won at least one of those fights. And the fight against Peter Yan, he gave him his toughest test, probably that he's had as champion. So Corey Sandhagen's had a brilliant 2021, even though he lost.
Yeah, and we'll move on. You know, KO of the year. I think this one's a bit more up in the air. I think we had a split team on this. A lot of people went for Jiri Prochaska, and that's the one that got it in the end. Beautiful spinning elbow. You don't see those every day. Is that the one you went for?
It actually isn't. I was with the other side of the team. I was with Corey Sandhagen's flying knee on Frankie Edgar. And you're absolutely right. This was pretty much a 50-50 draw in the low kick war room, basically. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with Jiri Prochazka because that was such a beautiful knockout. For some reason, I actually saw him knocking out Dominic Reyes in that way. I don't know how I thought that would happen, but it did. And it was just such a beautiful piece of violence by Jiri Prochazka. Got him up against the cage and just landed one of the most vicious elbows I've ever seen. Crumpled a guy like Dominic Reyes, which you do not do every day. And it's a fully deserving winner. No one's ever going to argue with it. I know I'm not. That being said, just for the pure technique of it, and for especially for how early in the fight it was against such a high level fighter, I did have Corey Sandhagen against Frankie Edgar. You know, if you can jump as high as Frankie Edgar is tall and still knock him out with a knee, you know you've done something pretty special. And for me, that in terms of pure technical mastery and technical composition, for me, that was one of the best pieces of mixed martial arts that I've seen in all of this year. And for that reason, it just pipped Yuri Prochazka for me personally. But I'm in no way mad at Yuri Prochazka winning either. As you said, it was pretty much a dead heat between those two.
Yeah, and I also went for Sandhagen. For me, as you said, he's had a great year despite the fact he's 1-2. That was just a brilliant way to start it off. Pure technique to start your guy like Frank like that, who is probably on the downslide, but just to catch him like that. The cameras in the arena didn't even manage to get the best shot of it. Everyone's out of focus and things like that because it was just so out of nowhere. It was so explosive. Whereas the reason why I picked it over Jerry's is because you kind of seen it coming. He did beat the brakes off Dominic Reyes for quite a while, and it was impressive the way he finished him. It was a brilliant knockout, and I've got no complaints about that. But the fact that Sandhagen, it was just one technique that finished him off with that got the job done, whereas Jerry had been beating him up for 2 rounds. So that was my thinking in that. And also someone who didn't get a mention, but I think deserves a mention is Bahamundas, who is KO by Roosevelt Roberts. Spinning wheel kick. We've seen a few of them now, and apparently they're not always going to get knocked off the air, but that was just beautiful. And in terms of someone who, that performance as well, it was dominance from start to finish. And I was thinking watching it, he just needs to get the finish because it's been such a great performance, but to be that, to help a star rise, he needs to finish it off, and then he just did like that. So that's someone else who I wanted to give a shout out to. Didn't get enough love in Low Kick Award, so I just wanted to shout him out.
Yeah, that's a great shout out. One other quick shout out that I'll give is Rose Namajunas against Weili Zhang at UFC 261. Thought that's one of the most beautiful head kicks I've ever seen as well. That technique, Rose is engaging with Weili in the middle of the octagon, pulls back, pulls out that sniper of a head kick. That was a very beautiful moment of artistry as well, and I think that very much deserves to be mentioned too.
Absolutely. Rose Namajunas doesn't win titles in normal ways. It's always spectacular. Can't wait to see our next one. And we'll move on. Submission of the year. I've literally just posted about our results for this. So we were split as a team. And for me, I didn't want to ask anyone for a tiebreaker for the simple fact that it's 2 very different submissions that have been voted submission of the year for 2 very different reasons. So first off, we got Andre Muniz against Jacare Souza. My personal pick, I thought, in terms of technique, who he's managed to pull this off against. Jacare is, a wizard on the floor. And the fact that he's actually managed to snap his arm, for me, in terms of pure submission, that is the best of the year. But a lot of people tended to pick Brandon Moreno's win over Figueiredo, and that was a brilliant submission, but it was more textbook in terms of beating someone up, taking the back, choking them out. And but it was a brilliant moment nonetheless. So I didn't want to split them. I think they're both deserving winners. What do you think?
I actually went for a third option. I kind of went a little bit outside the box, perhaps not too much, but a tiny bit. Those are both amazing picks, by the way. And if I had to pick one of them, I probably would side with Andre Muniz as well, just because of the devastation of the finish, as you just said. But my pick was actually Anthony Hernandez against Rodolfo Vieira at UFC 258. And the reason that I picked this is because Rodolfo Vieira, no one gave Anthony Hernandez a shot really against Rodolfo Vieira. Everybody thought Rodolfo would get him to the ground, tie him up, and basically squash him within a round. And Anthony Hernandez, when I beat him up for that first round, and then that second round, knocked him down and got one of the most vicious anaconda chokes locked in that I've ever seen. I mean, it was absolute savagery from Hernandez. And I would say it was one of the biggest upsets of this year as well. Obviously, that was usurped very late on. I won't spoil anything for anyone, but it was usurped pretty dramatically. But that would be my third option. Anthony Hernandez's anaconda choke at UFC 258. And even then, it probably leans more to the side of Andre Muniz in terms of actual execution. It's not the most common submission we ever see, but it's one of the most vicious. So for me, I would give a shout out to Anthony Hernandez against Rodolfo Vieira.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant submission. The shock factor also carries it up, and the fact that the jiu-jitsu player got submitted. For me, the reason I picked Muniz over that is just because it was more a fatigue thing for Vieira. That's why he got tapped. He tired out, and the quickest route out, the less painful route out is to get submitted. So that's what he did. Whereas for me, Muniz was fresh in the fight against someone who is definitely past the prime, but has been so good on the floor, and to manage to catch him in such a sweet way, and I felt like before the armbar was even on, the arm was snapped. It was on that quick, so it was just a brilliant piece of technique, and it's always a great year for submissions, and we've had a few more this year, and as it's been evidenced by the low kick staff, we haven't been able to split them. I think Hernandez did get a lot of love too in there. Muniz, Moreno, there's been lots to love, and we'll move on. So we've got the breakout star, which for people who aren't sure what this means, who has had the biggest year? It doesn't need to be like a prospect, but who has had the one, kind of someone who was maybe a mid-level fighter or a low-level fighter and has rose up to prominence in 2021. So my examples of these are Derek Brunson and Charles Oliveira. So for me, Derek Brunson for years has been a gatekeeper. I feel like this year he's really stepped out of that role. Dyed his hair blonde. He's been funny on social media, and he's been dominating guys in the octagon. So I think he's had a really great 2021, and I think he could potentially go and be a champion now in 2022. And also Oliveira, obviously, we've seen his story. At the end of last year, he got that win over Tony Ferguson, but I wasn't too convinced on his world championship ability, because Tony Ferguson at that point had just been beat up by Justin Gaethje. I think it did take away from that win of Oliveira, who wasn't able to finish him. So, and he really surprised me. To get that win over Chandler is one thing, but then to go and beat Poirier, who for me looked like the best lightweight in the world, and do it quite convincingly, really. I know he had a tough first round, but I think in the end he really did do it quite easily. And now he's set up for a brilliant 2022 where he can have any fight he wants, and I really don't see him losing. If you feel like he's just in his prime, he's got that Conor McGregor money fight there. He's really smashed it in 2021.
Yeah, all great picks. I took Breakout star in perhaps its most debutorial definition, in terms of someone who's come in at the very beginning and made a huge impact in 2021. I like how you've moved it with Charles Oliveira, and if I'd have taken it in that way, he absolutely would have been my pick. But I went very left field with this one, and I actually picked the guy who a lot of people think is the nightmare to Israel Adesanya, and that's Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira admittedly has only fought once this year, but his knockout over Michalis was just unreal. It was highlight reel worthy stuff in his first fight in the UFC, and it is the way you make an impact, and it's the way you make a name for yourself, and he ticked all of those boxes with one flying knee. Now, admittedly, with Alex Pereira, his ground game was exposed, but that will get better with each opponent that he fights. But his stand-up game is unmatched, and that's the thing that people aren't focusing enough on. And I think a big 2022 will be had for Alex Pereira. So for me, I picked Alex Pereira more in terms of anticipatory status, in terms of what he will do, rather than almost what he's done in the way that Charles Oliveira has. But for me, I'm going to stand behind Alex Pereira.
Yeah, that's a good pick. He's on the verge of having a great 2022, breaking out in 2022. Obviously, the KO over Michailidis was absolutely sweet. But in terms of, for me, he's still got work to do. Obviously, we've seen the holes in his wrestling. There does seem a route to victory, and he's facing Bruno Silva next, which is a great fight. So I think if he can get a run of 3 fights in 2022, he could potentially be in line for the title shot. I think they're going to rush him. Another guy, I think Sean Strickland's had I can't think how many fights he's had, but in terms of his overall star power and his ability to talk and get himself attention and all these things, he's becoming a a low-key player at middleweight. I think I think a lot of people, he says controversial stuff, but I think a lot of people find him quite funny despite what he says. So I think he's had a great 2021 as well. Brilliant win over Uriah Hall. I can't remember when his other fights before that was, but he's looked sublime since moving to middleweight. And we'll move on, which these two categories can overlap somewhat, but prospect of the year. Our LowKickMMA award went to Jack Shaw, who's had 2 wins. He looks pretty much perfect in the octagon. For me, I went for Paddy Pimblett. Just the one fight, looked a bit shaky at the beginning, but in terms of someone creating a buzz, having a breakout year, all the attention they got, all us people from Liverpool, England, the UK know what potentially had in terms of star power, but to see it actually come out and play out, and see his Instagram followers grow by 700,000 or whatever it was in a few days, it was great to watch. For someone, I was there when he made his professional debut in the Olympia years back now. So to see the rise from where he started to where he is now, and see how popular he's become, even with the American audience, it's been great to see, and I think he's really got a lot of potential moving into 2022.
Yeah, another great pick. I think in our group there was a 3-way tie for prospect of the year, and I think it was Ian Gary, Jack Shaw, and Paddy Pimblett, if I'm not wrong. I think all 3 of those were pretty much a 3-way tie for prospect of the year, and you could make an equally fair argument for all of them pretty much. Being Irish, though, I'm going to stick behind Ian Gary, I think, even though I love Paddy Pimblett and I got a lot of respect for Jack Shaw as well. I think Pimblett will actually have a really big 2022 as well. But I am going to speak a little bit about Ian Gary, because Ian Gary, I would argue, is one of the most well-rounded fighters ever to come out of Ireland. And I mean a fighter who can do everything. He's not exceptional at one aspect of his game, but he's a 7 out of 10 in all of them. And that's the kind of stuff that does make champions. His debut at Madison Square Garden was brilliant. He didn't fight the most high-ranked guy. I understand that. He perhaps didn't even fight the best guy, but his knockout was beautiful. And, don't sleep on it just because of that. The timing to put it all together was flawless. To duck under, to throw that left hook, and his opponent was out the second that shot was thrown. It was such an impressive debut for me and Gary, and a lot of people are going to expect big things of him, and understandably so. The guy made waves at Cage Warriors, where I believe he was the welterweight champion as well for a time. And a lot of people are going to expect him to have a big 2022, and I do as well. I would expect him to fight a couple of times at the very least. And I think he's going to have a really big year. I really do.
Yeah, I think it was Ian Gary and Jack Shaw, pretty much a tie, and I had to ask one of the other guys to just be a tiebreaker because we've already had the tie on the submission. I didn't want to do it on prospect, but it really could have gone either way. And if I had if I didn't pick Paddy, I would have picked Ian. I think he's had a brilliant year. Number one, he is a star. He's a star in the making. He talks the talk, he walks the walk, all that stuff. He got a win over the UFC veteran his first fight of the year. Then someone like Jack Grant for the title. And Jack Grant's gone on to Bellator and got a win, so he's no scrub either. And then Jordan Williams, as we said, not the toughest opponent, but and it was somewhat of a sloppy start to the fight, but the finish itself, it was brilliant. And yeah, he's another guy. Really can't wait to watch him in 2022. There's so many prospects, and it seems to be a lot of European prospects at the minute, which is great for us. I think Ilya Tapore got a vote. Jeff Molina, I think, was the only, American-based fighter who actually, got a sniff in this competition. It was all European guys. So, yeah, congrats to Jack Shaw, Ian Gary, Paddy Pimblett, all those guys. They've had brilliant years, and it just sets us up for a brilliant 2022. And we'll move on to the next one. So, for me, performance of the year, I think I'm going to pick someone who people might have forgot about because it was so long ago, but Francis Ngannou against Stipe Miocic, for me, at the time, I was so shocked. I picked Francis to win, but I didn't expect him to look like that. He had the defensive wrestling, he looked calm, he had the offensive wrestling, and he just really he just beat up Miocic, who for me, and a lot of people is the best heavyweight of all time. So to see Francis do that, see the evolution in his game, it was for me, it was the most impressive performance of 2021. Although it was a while ago, and a lot's gone on since then. I just want to see him back in the octagon. He's a phenom, so it'll be great to see him against Cyril Gambo. For me, that was the performance of the year. Who have you got?
Yeah, that's another very, very solid choice. And you're right. I think it was so long ago, people do forget about it quite quickly. But it's a very good choice, I have to say. My choice is going to be very controversial because it probably involved the most controversial fight of 2021. And the performance has been overshadowed by the way the fight ended. And that's Petr Yan against Aljamain Sterling. Now, I have, and I do think quite rightly so, criticized Petr Yan quite a lot for how he handled his disqualification loss and how he basically carried himself in the aftermath of that. But one thing you cannot take away from Petr Yan is how good he was against Aljamain Sterling. Sterling, I think, came in very overconfident, borderline arrogant, came in throwing all these ridiculous whirlwind techniques, and Petr Yan just shut him down. That's the only way you can describe it. He was literally like an iron wall. He just shut him down from round one until the very end. I don't think Aljamain won a single. One judge had Aljamain winning the fight somehow. I still don't understand how the hell that happened. But Petr Yan was just walking him down, knocking him down with nearly every half-decent shot that he landed. And he had Aljamain not even on the ropes. He had Aljamain through the ropes by the time that disqualifying knee landed. There is no argument. Petr Yan was going to win that fight. It was his own stupidity and his own lack of awareness that cost him his title. It was no one else's fault but his. But that being said, in terms of an actual performance, it was flawless up until that point. He couldn't have fought a better fight. And so on that basis, on the solid performance alone, I'm going to give it to Petr Yan.
I think he looked. I think he even looked better in the Sandhagen fight. Petr Yan's, for me, there's not going to be a moment to shout him out, so I might as well do it here. For me, he's the best bantamweight on the planet, and bantamweight is the most stacked division in MMA. Full stop. There's about 30 fighters who are brilliant, and Petr Yan is, for me, he is a level or two above all of them. He is that good. I don't think anyone's going to get near him over the next few years. I think he dispatches of anyone who comes his way. Dillashaw, Aldo, Merab, Sterling. I honestly think he's that good. I think he's 28 years old. Just the one loss on his record. He just looks like a phenom. And the thing is, he tends to start slowly. But I feel like he's just downloading that information, kind of Floyd Mayweather style. He's letting you have that first round. He's catching you what you're doing, and then he's starting to tee off on you. So, yeah, I honestly think he's brilliant. I wouldn't personally pick it as the performance of the year. Obviously, Aljo had moments at the start of the fight, but as I said, I felt like Petr Yan was really taking over, and by the end, really, Aljo was just on the floor getting beat up, and lucky for him, he got hit with an illegal lay, and we get to see that fight again. It's a shame we've had to wait so long, but as I said, we've had some great fights in the interim. So yeah, a lot of other performances, and in terms of the next award, which is surprise package. These are two performances that can also go in this one for me. You've got Juliana Pena beating Amanda Nunes, obviously one of the biggest upsets ever. And then you've got Glover Teixeira, who it shouldn't have been a surprise because he did it last year. He was beating up all these people. I was on this podcast with Ryan, and every time Glover would be in one of these fights, I'd be no way has he beaten him. He's 40, he's getting beat, and I just look stupid every time. So, yeah, you can imagine how stupid it looked when he actually went and won the title, dominated Jan Blachowicz, start to finish, tapped him out. It was such a brilliant performance. And yeah, although it shouldn't have been a surprise for me at 42 years old, I think he is now, it's still a surprise, no matter how good he's looked previously. So yeah, Pena and Glover for me. Who do you think's been a surprise?
It's got to be Pena. I think it really does. Like you said, and to be fair, you were very fair in how you said it. Glover was the surprise that shouldn't have been a surprise, because we all knew if he could get Yan to the ground, Yan was going to be in really bad trouble, because Glover is just so Glover is one of the true masters of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's almost like he's not just a black belt. He's an artist on the ground. He's like Charles Oliveira at 205 pounds. That's how good he is. And credit to him, he did what everybody thought he might be able to do, and he made it happen. So that was almost the feel-good story of 2021 for me, even though everybody loves Jan Blachowicz, and rightly so. To see the last old sort of outlaw finally get a title, it just made so many people feel good, and it made me feel good as well. But the surprise package is Juliana Pena, because no one thought it was going to happen. And I'll be honest, I don't even think Juliana Pena believed it was going to happen. I think she tried to manifest it, and I think she did a very good job of it. But if you asked her genuinely before the fight, did she think it was going to happen? I doubt she would have been as confident as she said she was. But by God, if this isn't the biggest upset the UFC's ever seen, it was absolutely unreal. And what makes it even more unreal is that this wasn't just a fluke shot that dropped Nunes, or this wasn't a fluke takedown where Nunes couldn't get back up. Juliana Pena did what she said she was going to do. She took her punishment in that first round, let Amanda stand there flat-footed and completely exhaust herself, and then she walked forward. She walked forward, started tagging Nunes, completely drained the rest of her gas tank. And one of the most shocking images of 2021 is Amanda Nunes getting ragdolled on the ground. Not only can she not get up, she can't even get her own hands up to the side of her head. I mean, this is something no one thought they'd see in 1,000 years, and it happened. And it was Juliana Pena that did it. So in terms of, the surprise package of the year, there's no fight that ticks all the boxes the way that Juliana Pena does. Not only did she upset arguably the greatest women's fighter of all time, but to quote Frank Sinatra, she did it her way. She did it the way she said she would. So for me, surprise package of the year, the Venezuelan vixen, Juliana Pena.
Yeah, and obviously I've made a meal of it, but I did pick her going into that one. I definitely think she thought she was going to win. For me, she's so underrated as a fighter. Like someone I've been criminally, like I have underrated Glover. And it's mainly an age thing. I think once you into your 40s, you shouldn't really be doing what he's doing, which is crazy. But for Pena to be so underrated, she's never shown any sign of a weak chin or anything like that. But people are saying she's going to get knocked out in the first round. She's been in. The only people who've beaten her in the UFC Valentina Shevchenko and Jermaine Durandame, who are basically, definitely probably top 5 all time, in MMA. Durandame, if Nunes isn't there, she's got the title herself. So I rate them both highly, and I think it's the way she lost. The fact that she got submitted by striking experts, I think made a lot of people overlook her in terms of what she can do. But when you look at Pena's record, her type of style, she is a grinder. She's tough. She's got all these things. And if you see how Nunes has lost in the past, it's the people like her. So for me, it weren't that much of a surprise. And especially when you consider that Nunes has somewhat took her eye off the ball. She's had a family. She seems very happy. She seems very wealthy. And she's been speaking about retirement. So for me, that was all red flags when you've got someone like Pena who's just, a killer. And but still, nonetheless, it was a huge upset. I think it was 7-1 by the time the fight started. Imagine that the odds went even bigger after, Nunes did have a decent first round, but I never had any doubt that Pena, wasn't just going to fall over. She is a tough girl, whatever happens, and it'll be a great rematch when it happens, because hopefully that lights a fire under Nunes's belly, and we get it again in the early part of next year, and she comes prepared, and then I think we've got a 5-round, absolutely back and forth, but like brawl. I don't think it was a fluke, and I think we'll see that next time. But yeah, I think even though I weren't, particularly surprised, I do think for pretty much everyone, Pena's causing that upset was huge, and she's the surprise package she's got to be.
Yeah, she definitely does, and what makes it even more of an upset, like you just said as well, is that it wasn't a fluke. If it had been a fluke and it had been a lucky punch, then I probably would have gone for Glover over Jan. But the fact that it was so methodical and so planned, that's what makes it the biggest upset, because it proves Juliana's preparation was so much better than the most dominant champions was. And that's what makes it the upset that it is. So Juliana Pena is a more than worthy winner, because we'll probably not see an upset like that for a long time.
Bookmakers need to learn it. A fight's a fight, and someone like Pena deserves the credit. On the odds, I'm sure a lot of her family made money betting on a big, so good for them. But bookmakers don't learn with these odds. Even the Holly Holm one was ridiculous when Razi was in there. Undefeated boxer. It's just ridiculous. But we'll go into it. I mean, boxer and MMA, by the way. So biggest disappointment. It's a shame we've got to have this award, but some people just haven't had a great 2021, and for me, John Jones takes the cake. Really, he hasn't fought. He's been in trouble with the law. He got inducted to the Hall of Fame and got arrested for domestic violence on the same night. That is just typical John Jones. So for me, he's been a disappointment, and the fact that we haven't got to see him fight has just been so disheartening. As someone who's been waiting for him to go up to heavyweight since Cain Velasquez was the champion, to actually finally see him relinquish the title, say he's doing all this stuff, and then it just doesn't happen. It's been sad to see, and hopefully we'll get all that in 2022, but I'm really not optimistic anymore. And that for me has been the most disappointing thing of 2021.
Yeah, if we're talking outside the octagon, it's John Jones, and I don't think anybody comes close to being as bad as him. The fact that we haven't seen him in the octagon makes it even worse, because I've actually said this quite a lot before. John Jones is the only fighter I've ever seen who's been able to hold up a division he's never fought in before. And that's an impressive feat. So in a weird way, congratulations, John Jones, because you're the first guy I've ever seen do that. So inverted props to you, I guess. But if we're talking inside the octagon, I think it's someone else, and I think it's Cody Garbrandt. And the reason I think it's Cody Garbrandt is I had very high hopes for Cody following that Rafael Assunção knockout towards, I think it was the end of 2020, if I'm not wrong. And, I kind of thought, right, this is the spark Cody needed. We're going to see the old Cody again. It goes in, cool, calm, collected, outboxes any bantamweight in the planet, and makes a charge towards the title again. And did it happen? Well, no, it didn't. In fact, it went quite badly wrong. And I don't like saying that, because I'm a big Cody Garbrandt fan. Have been really since his Thomas Almeida fight, and even a little bit before since. But, he went out and he got dominated by Rob Font for 5 rounds, which there's no shame in itself, because Rob Font's a top 5, top 6 bantamweight on any day. So there's no shame in that. And he went out, he fought one of the top guys, and he lost. It is what it is. But going down to flyweight and getting knocked out the way he did, that to me is what makes this the biggest disappointment of 2021. And it just proves that Cody doesn't have a chin anymore. He's just taken too much damage to really ever take a punch again. He went down, to his credit, I have to admit, I thought he would struggle with it. He actually looked good. Physically, he looked good at 125 and made the weight cut look relatively easy, way better than his best friend TJ Dillashaw did, if I'm honest. The problem is, in the fight against Kai Kara France, the first minute or so, he had a couple of good moments, couple of good shots that landed, moving in and out. And then he got emotional again. He went out, tried to swing wildly at Kai Kara France, and he got clocked badly, and it was downhill tumbling from there on. Kai took his time, was cool, composed, merciless, took his shots, landed 2 big overhands on Cody, and just knocked him out. And the biggest reason I think Cody's the biggest disappointment of 2021 is that I think he's at the biggest career crossroads now out of any fighter really we could mention, because he can't win at 135, and he's been violently knocked out at 125 as well. So now he almost doesn't have a home anywhere. And like you said, you actually said it perfectly at the very beginning, Jordan. This is an award that I don't like giving out, but in the spirit of fairness, we have to, because with the good, we take the bad. And unfortunately, the worst of the bad for me has been Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah, Cody for me has been on that trajectory for a while now. You know, it's been like the myth of the Dominic Cruz performance. Like it's just he's never been at that level ever since. He's been making rookie mistakes and all these things. So yeah, disappointed to see, but not surprised really. I thought he'd fare better at flyweight. I thought he'd be able to deal with Carter France, but he didn't. So I think what he needs to do is really drop down his levels. I think Anthony Smith did it best when he went on that little losing streak. He dropped down way down levels and just got to, get some confidence back, get a few wins against some people you should be beating, work your way back up and come back as a new fighter with new skills and things like that. But he just seems so intent to go straight for the title and so desperate to get back where he wants to be. It's really hampering his career, and he keeps getting these pretty embarrassing losses, in terms of the way he's losing. So yeah, not great year for Cody. And also I'd want to mention in terms of in the octagon, Conor McGregor, not a great year at all. To go in against Dustin Poirier, get knocked out first time ever, then to break your leg, very disappointing. And for the fans as well, Conor McGregor is still the biggest star in the sport, and we only got to see him twice this year, and what a disappointing year for him. And also Darren Till for me, obviously being from Liverpool, I'm always rooting for him, and to see that performance against Derek Brunson, who we spoke about earlier, who I have been impressed by, but to be honest, I didn't think he should be getting them type of wins. As I said, I've always thought him as more of a gatekeeper, and to see him go out and dominate Darren Till like that was disappointing, especially from the fact that Darren didn't come in the best shape. He seems to be injured. He seems to be out of shape, and he paid for it. And I think wins and losses, he's dismissing them in terms of he's saying they don't really matter. Come the end of the day, he's going to be champion, blah blah blah. But I think they do matter. I think you should go in and be at your best every time, and if possible. And for me, it just seemed like he might have turned up to get a quick payday, and he weren't really bothered about winning and losing, and he weren't really prepared to fight. So that was disappointing for me. And now he's like Cody, where he's kind of at a crossroads. Where is his home? Does he go to 170, where he got knocked out by George Masvidal, or does he stay at 185 and kind of do what I've just said Cody should do and drop down a few levels, work his way up and get some wins? He's one of them guys who's almost too big of a star to do that. But and same with Cody. So yeah, disappointing year for Till as well. Yeah, so Till, McGregor in the octagon, John Jones has been just my biggest disappointment as a fight fan. Not seeing him compete, seeing him getting in more trouble, and just being a tough one.
Yeah, it's been a very tough one, and I don't want to say I like the Darren Till pick, but in the context of this award, it makes a lot of sense. Darren Till, obviously, everybody in the UK and Ireland knows Darren Till, and nearly everybody likes Darren Till because the guy has got so much potential. He really could be champion. And the problem is that you're absolutely right in what you say. It almost looks like he's throwing his arse at it. And, I think he's so obsessed with, I think the problem with Darren Till is that he's become so obsessed with social media and his following that he's become more happy with taking the piss out of his opponents and then getting beaten by them. When it came to the Masvidal fight, he was making memes about Masvidal. This is going to be easy. I'm going to run him over. Don't get me wrong. They were funny as hell. I'm not going to lie. But when it came to the Derek Brunson fight, literally he spit, because I follow Darren Till on Instagram as well, as I'm sure everybody watching does. And every single day leading up to that fight for about a month, there was something about Derek Brunson. There was a picture, there was a comment, it was him saying he was going to put him on his ass, all this kind of stuff. And he went out and he got dominated. So the thing with Darren Till is it's not even necessarily, I don't think it's as severe an issue as Cody Garbrandt per se, because I think his is very severe. I think the problem with Darren Till is that he needs to put his phone away. I think he needs to get away from the distractions. He needs to work on that ground game and that wrestling game. And he needs to get his ass back in the octagon and get some confidence back, a bit like Anthony Smith, as you said. Darren Till can still turn this around, but only he can do it. And I have to question whether he's willing to do it at this point. But one way or the other, whether he's willing to or he's not, whether he can or he can't, 2022 is going to be a defining year in Darren Till's career. And this year, I think, will determine his future career trajectory, because he'll either come back from this or he won't. And if he doesn't, he's just going to keep falling and falling and falling. But if he can turn it around, I should say. But like I said, it's only him that can do it. He can't rely on anybody else. He can only do this himself if he wants this badly enough. So I'm curious to see. John Jones, I've kind of just run out of words with. I've defended the guy till the very end and then some, but he is what he is, and he is what he'll always be. Daniel Cormier was right all those years ago. He was a phony. He was a fake, and now he's exposing it. And the last point I'll say before we hopefully get back onto some more positivity, trying to clout your name off of something Chael Sonnen is going through is one of the lowest things I've ever seen anybody try and do, John. So all I'm going to say in terms of being PG on this show is stop doing it, because it's not working and no one believes you. Get your shit together, get your life together, stop worrying about what other people are doing, do your own thing, fight your own people, to quote Tyson Fury, and get back in there and prove that you are indeed the best. Stop trying to Twitter clout off of other people and do your own thing.
Absolutely. And just go back to the Till thing, he's not being out, even his worst night, he had Brunson in trouble a few times. He dropped Robert Whittaker. He's dropped Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's got something to offer. He just needs to fine tune it, and it's been disappointing that it seems like a couple of years now where we've been saying, he's over relies on the left hand, or he needs to do this, or he needs to do that, and it hasn't been done. And then on top of that, to see his worst performance in the octagon this year was disappointing. And there's talk about him fighting Uriah Hall at UFC London. And for me, it's not even enough just to win that fight, because if he wins that fight over 5 rounds, it's going to be a snooze fest, and it's it's going to turn fans off. Uriah Hall is not a top contender at all. He's shot shy. He doesn't like to fight. He had real trouble with Anderson Silva, who at this point was like 45 years old, and it was on a long losing streak. So for me, if Darren Till faces Uriah Hall, it's not enough just to win. He needs to go in, blast him out of there, and just make a statement, and then he's back. But I think that will be a career-defining fight, because that will tell us, is Darren Till going to get back to contenders, or is he just one of them guys who's going to make up the numbers? So it's very interesting. I'm really hoping it's the first, and he smashes Hall and is back in the game, because it was very clear he was injured last time out, so you can kind of let him off for that one. But at the same time, should he have been fighting, and what was he fighting for if he weren't ready for it? So we'll move on. We don't want to be negative, and we'll talk about the best event of the year. And for me, on paper, this was best event of the year, and in production, it was the best fight of the event of the year, and it was UFC 268, Madison Square Garden. We spoke about it here earlier when we were speaking about Chandler Gaethje, and we were speaking about Ian Gary. It was absolutely stacked card. Alex Pereira was on there as well, and it was just such a great night to fight. When you get these cards and you put them together and deliver, and it's just as a MMA fan, as definitely a European MMA fan, it's worth staying up for. And this was just the best card of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable card. To be honest with you, my best card of the year, I've seen very few people actually mention, and I'm actually quite surprised by it, because for me, it's UFC 261 in April of this year. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, notwithstanding the fights that were on the card. This was the first pay-per-view event that had fans back, following obviously the terrible coronavirus that we're all going through right now. And hopefully we see the end of that much sooner rather than later, because it's just been horrible for everybody. but to see fans back again was unbelievable. And the thing that actually made this fight card the best for me, the noise for every single fight was mind-boggling. You know, I have never seen a Chris Weidman Uriah Hall fight that loud. I've never seen an Anthony Smith fight that loud. And to see every fighter getting absolutely raucously cheered by 10, 15,000 people on the floor was just, it was bone chilling, it was spine tingling, and it was all around bloody brilliant. Not to mention that we saw Valentina Shevchenko dominate Jessica Andrade. We saw that knockout from Rose Namajunas against Weili Zhang, that beautifully put together head kick. And we saw Kamaru Usman knock out Jorge Masvidal, which no one ever thought would happen either. You put all that together, and I think you have the best story card of 2021. I loved UFC 268 and I loved UFC 269. But for me, just when you consider everything and obviously the importance of the fans, it's got to be UFC 261 for me.
Yeah, plenty of great cards this year as well, and UFC 61 was definitely one of them. And we'll move on. This is quite a big award. We've left to last fighter of the year. So our awards came out. It was a few days ago. Now we voted Kamaru Usman. I voted Kamaru Usman, as you said there. Big knockout over Masvidal. And I was actually just watching that knockout, and I think Masvidal was almost disrespecting Usman's power and was allowing him to throw shots in the hope that he'd counter him with something big, and got knocked out himself. And then you've got a win over Gilbert Burns, which, you know, Gilbert Burns was tearing through the division, shut him down real quick. And then the Colby Covington fight, you know, 5-round war, and he managed to get through it again. You know, he did enough in the early rounds. He really put it on Colby, and Colby come back, you know, with a vengeance. And say what you want about Colby, but he is a tough competitor. He is the second best welterweight. You know, no doubt about it in my mind. So to see Usman get 2 convincing wins over him is very impressive, and that's why for me he just edges out Charles Oliveira for fighter of the year.
Yeah, it's a very clear 2-horse race between Kamaru Usman and Charles Oliveira, and you could just make as brilliant a case for one as you could the other. However, I did think it was Charles Oliveira, and I think there's one very big reason that separates why Charles is and why Kamaru Usman isn't. And the reason is this: despite how tough welterweight is, and welterweight is very, very tough, I don't think there's anybody who majorly expected that Kamaru wouldn't be the welterweight champion by the end of this year. And I don't think anybody thought Charles would be the lightweight champion this year. So I think in terms of defying expectations, Charles has done better than anybody ever could have. And that's not even considering the quality of people that he faced. You know, he fought Michael Chandler. About 85 to 90% of people thought it was a sure thing. Chandler was going to go in. Chandler was going to go and knock him out. And he came very close, to be fair. He was within a couple of punches of probably the ref stopping the fight. But Charles Oliveira, when I knocked him out with a beautiful left hook, by the way, one of the most beautiful left hooks that I think I've seen anybody throw, much less land. You know, the timing was just utterly impeccable. So he goes out, he beats one of the top 5 lightweights in Michael Chandler. And then we come to the fight with Dustin Poirier, and no one thought Oliveira was going to win, because quite rightly so, a lot of people, myself included, thought Dustin Poirier was the best lightweight on planet Earth. And he still is one of them, but he isn't number 1 anymore because Charles Oliveira is solidified as number 1. And Charles went out and fought the perfect neutralizing fight against Dustin Poirier. Dustin went out, had a really good round 1, had Charles hurt quite badly at one point, but Charles just went out and swarmed him, you know, and the second he got his back, we all knew what was going to happen. Clung onto him like a spider, got the rear naked choke. He actually deceived Dustin into dropping his hands for that split second, and then got the hand round, and it was good night Irene from there. So if you look at the resume, to tap out Dustin Poirier and to knock out Michael Chandler and to be the king of arguably the toughest division in the UFC right now, I think it makes enough of a story for Charles Oliveira to be the best fighter of 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a two-horse race. I just edge Usman just because he's got that extra win, and the extra winner is over Masvidal, which is a fight we didn't really want to see, but just the way he did it was very impressive. And then two top contenders. Whereas Chandler probably hadn't earned his stripes to be in that spot. You know, he's been impressive in the fights, but it was just the one fight against Dan Hooker that got him that shot. So just small margins that edged him over Oliveira for me. And before we finish, we're just going to go quickly through all the divisions, name the champion right now, and name who we think is going to be champion by the end of 2022. So obviously, first up, we've got the ladies and we've got strawweight. Rose Namajunas, for me, is my personal favourite female MMA fighter. Just the way she performs, she's brilliant to watch. She always is in spectacular wins, especially when she's claiming titles. And I just don't think anyone's going to touch her this year. I think she's really coming into her prime right now. I think she's late 20s, maybe 29. And yeah, I feel like emotionally, all this stuff has kind of hindered her in the past in terms of her performing her best or fighting as much as we wanted her to. But I think now she's really coming into her own, and you know the outside of cage stuff is reflected inside the cage, and I don't think anyone's going to get near it in 2022. I expect her to fight at least a couple of times and defend.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. And Rose is definitely the best 115 fighter on the planet. I do have to admit, I think Weili Zhang won the second fight. That's just my opinion. I thought she won rounds 1, 2, and 3. But Rose has the belt. And when Rose has the belt, she does a bloody good job of not losing the belt for the most part. And I think the fight that's being touted for Rose, if not signed already, is Carla Esparza for early next year. And I think Rose is going to absolutely walk through her quite easily, actually. And then realistically, all that's left at 115 is probably Weili Zhang again. So it's a 2, maybe a 3-horse race at a stretch at 115. But I agree with you. Rose comes out on top, and Rose is the champ by the end of 2022.
We'll speak about it, but it's not really worth it. I'd say Valentina Shevchenko, flyweight champion. She'll be flyweight champion for as long as she wants to be. She could be, in my opinion, she could be mid to late 40s, still beating all these girls. She is that good, and the competition there's so much gap between Valentina and everyone else in that division. So, I think definitely Valentina is going to be champion for as long as she wants that belt, and I think she'll keep hold of it. Probably make a few defenses in 2022.
Yeah, it just is Valentina. It just is. The problem is for every other contender, women's flyweight, is that Valentina's fought all their styles. Valentina's fought them at their own styles, and Valentina has destroyed them at their own styles. There's no one who provides anything that Valentina hasn't seen before and hasn't dominated. So for me, you're absolutely right. Valentina holds that belt as long as she wants to.
It's a tough one now because we've got the women's bantamweight division. Obviously, we've got a rematch coming up, Pena against Nunes. I think Pena could keep this title. I think she will not lose the title in terms of in the cage, but I think she's kind of spoke about wanting to go to 125 and wanting to go to 145, and then at that point it might become an issue like Conor McGregor, where the UFC might take the title or something politically might take the title from her. But in terms of in the octagon, I think Pena is going to keep hold of this title.
Yeah, 135 just got a whole lot tougher to predict with that Pena ultimate upset against Amanda Nunes. The problem is after that performance and seeing how versatile and adaptable Pena is, it's so hard to bet against her. You know, how can anybody sit here and say, oh yeah, Pena dominated, you know, the most dominant champion arguably there is, but she's going to lose it to her again? It's at this point in time as we're recording this, it's too hard of an argument to make. So I am going to, at the moment, barring injuries, barring political issues and so on and so forth, I will say that Juliana Pena is still the bantamweight champion by the end of 2022.
Yeah, and we'll go on to featherweight, which for me this is actually not worth talking about at all. It is a at this point, what's the point? There's no division. There's no fighters. Megan Anderson's gone. Felicia Spencer's just retired. I don't understand the point of this belt. So the only reason this belt would make sense is if Kayla Harrison comes in. So either one thing's going to happen, Kayla Harrison will hold the belt, or they'll scrap the division. I know Nunes has got it right now, but I just don't see, unless Kayla Harrison comes in, I don't see the point in keeping this division. So my pick is Kayla Harrison, although if that doesn't come off, I think they'll just scrap it.
Yeah, that is pretty much all that's going to happen. The two scenarios that happen here are that Amanda Nunes fights Kayla Harrison for the 145 belt, or the division is just gone, because they tried to build the division around Chris Cyborg, and that plan went out the window when Cyborg got knocked out by Amanda Nunes. So realistically, you're right. There's no point in it hanging on anymore. It's kind of a ceremonial division now, where Nunes fights once or twice a year in that division against whoever they throw up there, just to keep it going. But there's no real point anymore without a competitive fighter to actually challenge. And the thing is, with Kayla Harrison, you make an interesting point, because Kayla Harrison fights at 155 in the PFL, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
So she'll have to cut to 145 just to fight Amanda for that title. That's the only reason to keep that division going. If not, just close the doors on it. Because like you said, there's no Megan Anderson hasn't fought since that fight. Felicia Spencer's retired now as well. They were probably the two biggest fighters apart from Nunes in that division. So you're right. I think in 2022, they probably scrapped the division entirely.
Yeah, for me, that division was solely created for that Cyborg fight, which once he's got the belt, Nunes, this is one of the reasons I was picking against her, because she was just staying at that weight, so she didn't have to cut the extra 10 pounds. She could fight lesser opponents. Megan Anderson and Felicia Spencer, for me, aren't top tier and shouldn't be in with Nunes. There's plenty of fighters at bantamweight who would put ahead of them. So, yeah, I think it's Kayla Harrison, but I think Nunes, if Kayla Harrison comes along, will probably relinquish the belt, because she's got that fight with Pena to settle. So there could be some friction there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch, and we'll move on to the men's divisions now, because very exciting times at 125. Brandon Moreno is the champion. We've got a third fight with Figueiredo coming up. Does he hold on to the belt?
Against Figueiredo, yes, but I don't think he does for 2022. And that might be a bit of a shock, but I think Kai Kara-France is going to be the flyweight champion by the end of 2022. I mean, yes, it was Cody Garbrandt that he fought, but I was so impressed with Kai Kara-France's performance. The composure, the speed, and the knockout power are all very potent ingredients at 125. And I think he's going to put it all together to win that title. You know, you've got Alejandro Pantoja and you've got Askar Askarov at 125 as well. I think Kai Kara-France leapfrogs both of them for the title fight after the Figueiredo fight's done. And I can see Kara-France beating I can see Kara-France beating Moreno.
I'm expecting Moreno to defend in pretty similar way against Figgy. And then after that, I think Askarov could cause problems. I think Kara-France would be a good option in terms of sellability and things like that. But I think in the actual fight, I wouldn't give him too much of a chance. I'd be more worried about, if from a Moreno fan standpoint, Pantoja or Askarov. But this is a title I think in the next few years is going to change hands quite a lot. But I think Moreno might be able to see out 22 with it. I wouldn't be surprised. I think a lot of them are 50-50 fights he's going to be in. And I think, you know, it'll be split decisions and really close fights. But yeah, I think he submits Figgy, and then after that, whoever he faces, he'll probably be able to edge out over 5 rounds. But yeah, tough division, and he'll do well to keep hold of it. And, you know, it's not my strongest pick on this one. So we'll move on, and we've got the bantamweight. So right now we've got Sterling as the champ, and Peter Yan as the interim champ. They're them two expect to unify in the first few months of 2022. And for me, Yan, as I said earlier, he's the guy at bantamweight. He's young. He's just coming into his prime, and already for me, he's I think he's going to have a brilliant 2022. I think he's going to beat about three or four of these guys in 2022. And he's probably going to be like pound for pound number one by the end of the year. That's how highly I rate him. So yeah, he'll have the belt. It definitely won't be Sterling for me.
Yeah, first of all, I think Davidson Figueiredo is going to go up to bantamweight in 2022 because the guy's murdering himself to make 125. So we will see that move. With that, I'm pretty confident. And I'd be shocked if Petr Yan wasn't the bantamweight champion by the end of 2022 as well. I think stylistically, Corey Sandhagen was probably Petr Yan's toughest matchup in the division that he could have had. And Petr Yan dealt with it pretty well, I have to say. Even though I love Corey Sandhagen, I think he dealt with it really, really well. And like you said, I think he's going to beat at least 3 to 4 of these top 5 contenders. I can see him probably fighting maybe Rob Font at some point. I think he smokes TJ, and I think he beats Aldo as well. Those are probably the fights that I would say right now, obviously including Aljamain Sterling as well. I think he beats him too. And I can see King Petr Yan ruling the bantamweight division in 2022 once again.
Yeah, for me, there's obviously you've got Dominic Cruz, Aldo probably going to fight each other. That's a number one contender fight. Winner of that, I think he beats. TJ Dillashaw's right there, beats him for me. I think that might be his toughest test, but I think he beats him. Merab got that win over Marias. He's probably one fight away now from a title shot if he beats someone significant. So I think he's another guy who will, if he gets caught early by Petr Yan, there will not be any recovery. He won't get away with it like Marias allowed him to. So for me, Petr Yan's the man, and I think he's going to prove it in 2022. And he's someone I'm really looking forward to watching. And then in the next division, we've got featherweight. So Volkanovski's got the title right now. He's had a great 2021 as well. Can he hold on to that belt for a little while longer? I think third time's charm for Max Holloway. I do. I think if Max gets that fight, I think he will. For me, he won the second fight pretty convincingly. I'll be honest. I was working, writing my story. Max Holloway beats Volkanovski, and then the cards come out. I was like, what's going on here? So I know it's pretty divisive, but I think Max Holloway convincingly beats him. I think third time around, he'll get the decision, and we might even see a fourth fight. So yeah, I think them two are the top two guys, and it'll be one of them or the other one. I'm going for Max.
Yeah, it'll definitely be one of those two, but I think it's actually Volk. I think Volk can hold on to that title. With that Brian Ortega fight, Volkanovski turned a lot of people. A lot of people thought that he was, and I hate using this term for the most part, a paper champion, and that he did lose the second fight to Holloway. I do agree. But at the end of the day, you can't criticize Volkanovski for that. He's there to fight. He's not there to judge. And he did what he had to do. But with that Ortega fight, Volkanovski proved how tough he is. And he proved that he'll never quit. And I think the big factor when he fights Holloway again, because he will fight Holloway again, is those leg kicks. Max does not defend those leg kicks. And one day his legs are going to get so beaten up that he starts to rapidly lose that speed for which he is so famous. I think Volkanovski's going to beat up the legs in the third fight. And I think he's going to take Max down and not let him get up again. And it's perhaps quite a bold opinion, but I think Volkanovski reigns supreme in 2022.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will be looking at that Yair fight and seeing a lot of gaps because Max Holloway, his output is tremendous, but he takes a few to land a few, and Volkanovski's got a bit of pop in his shot. So if he decides to sit down on his shots and really try and test that chin, he might find some success. There's only so many shots you can take as a fighter. So interested to see how Max Holloway's chin holds up in that fight. But in my opinion, I just think it'll be a nip and tuck fight again, and they'll give it to Holloway because of the last time. I just feel like I think a lot of people in terms of robberies and that type of word getting banded about would use that word, and I think it's pretty fair. I do think he was a convincing winner, and whatever happens in the next fight, I think he'll get the decision. Lightweight, very interesting one now. Charles Oliveira, for me, he is the man. I think at 32 years old, he's coming into it. A lot of people really can't get past because we've seen so much of him. 10 years it took to him to get to the title because we've seen him get knocked out and beaten all kinds of different ways. People think that's the same fight, and it's just not anymore. So for me right now, he's the best lightweight on the planet. He hasn't been hitting a peep out of anyone really. I know he's getting hit a lot, but as soon as he gets through that first round, it's game on. He's dominating people. Like Dustin Poirier really didn't get a sniff. It'd be interesting to see who they match him up with, because it's easier said than done surviving a first round against Conor McGregor, which I know a lot of people won't want to see, but money dictates sometimes, and that might happen. So that would be a very interesting fight. But then you've got Dariush, Makhachev. I think he gets by both of them. I'm not on the Islam train yet. So ultimately I'm gonna go Charles Oliveira. I don't think McGregor's gonna get a shot, and I think whoever does come along, he will deal with in 2022.
Yeah, very hard to disagree with. At the moment, my pick is Charles, but it is almost a split pick, because I am very curious to see what happens with the Makhachev Dariush fight. For me, this is the litmus test of Islam Makhachev. And if he can win against Beneil Dariush convincingly, then I'm on the hype train of Islam Makhachev, and I think he's got a real chance. But I can't say anything until I see that fight yet. So at the moment, for me, it's Charles Oliveira to reign supreme in 2022.
Yeah, and welterweight, we've got Kamaru Usman. He's dominating the division. Do we think anyone can beat him in 2022 is the first question.
No.
And does he move up to middleweight? It seems like he's just waiting for Izzy to move to light heavyweight so he can go to middleweight. So these are the questions I ask. I don't think anyone's going to beat him at welterweight in 2022. My question is, does he stay for the whole year at the weight? I'm going to say yeah. I think there's enough there keeping him busy. I think a Leon Edwards fight is, for me, I think it's a fresh opponent. I know he beat him, but it was so many years ago. They're both totally different fighters. There's a bit of animosity. That's a good fight. And then after that, you've got Khamzat, who I think is potentially going to get a title shot before he's ready. And then Usman's going to, make a statement. And I think that'll be it at welterweight for him. I think it'll be them two fights and he'll be done. And I think he'll win them both.
Yeah, there's a lot of spinning plates here with Kamaru Usman. There's very much a lot of moving parts. First of all, I think he's going to remain the welterweight champion. And aside from Leon Edwards, stylistically, I can't see many people getting close to Kamaru, because he's becoming more and more well-rounded the longer his career goes on. And that's just a nightmare prospect if you are a challenger. Now, the 185 move is very interesting, because I think if Kamaru beats Leon, because that fight has to happen this year. It was meant to happen in 2020, I think, and it fell through for whatever reason, and it was meant to happen this year and it fell through, but that's not the point. Kamaru has already cleaned out the division once. He's beaten Colby Covington, his nearest challenger, twice, and then he's beaten everybody else. He's beaten the Gilbert Burnses and so on and so forth. And I think we will actually see Kamaru fight at middleweight. I don't think it'll be a title fight, because he's already said he won't fight Adesanya as long as Israel is the champion. But I think we could see him fight a top 10 contender at middleweight and let him get his toe in the water at that weight class and tease that move up for the title fight if/when Israel Adesanya either moves up to 205 or loses his belt. So my overall answer to this question is, will anyone beat Kamaru Usman? No, I don't think they will. But will we see him at middleweight? I think it's more of a possibility than people think it is. It will not be against Adesanya, but it will be against a top 10 fighter.
Yeah, and I think Adesanya might be looking at that light heavyweight division now and thinking, I think that's why he went up, because he thought I'll beat Jan. And now he's looking at Glover, who's, as we say, he's in his 40s. Could he be susceptible to someone like Adesanya? I'm not sure. So, I think this year, in terms of, I think he'll just fight twice at welterweight, and that'll be Kamaru. I think he's wanting to slow down. He's been speaking about injured knees and things like that, and so I think it'll just be the two fights, and then in 2022 he'll move up. So I think he'll hold that belt, and I also think Adesanya will hold his belt. Following on from that, I think Adesanya at middleweight, that's his perfect weight. Like there's he doesn't need to pack on another 20 pounds to fight bigger guys. But I absolutely respect the desire to do so. You know, fortune favors the brave. I'd prefer fighters to move through divisions. I think it's the ultimate test of like a fighter's ability to go in against bigger guys and still be able to beat them. I think it's brilliant, and it's the thing to do. Do I think it's smart? Not necessarily. And I think Adesanya could have great success at middleweight, beating all these guys, and I think he will in 2022. I think he will get the better of Rob Whittaker once again. And then beyond that, you've got, who else have we got? We've got Derek Brunson. The one who I think could cause him problems down the line is Sean Strickland. I don't think he'll do enough to get a title shot in 2022, though. I think that might be the year after. So, yeah, but very interesting. Middleweight's another one. Really good division. Lots of up-and-coming guys ready to chomp at this big champion. So, yeah, but for me, Izzy keeps the title this year.
Yeah, middleweight is a really exciting division, again, with a lot of moving parts. Like you said, perhaps not a shocking prediction. I think Adesanya is still the middleweight champion by the end of 2022, because as in that top 10, top 15, I just can't see anybody taking it off of him. Whittaker's tried once, Whittaker's failed once, and I just don't see him getting it done the second time. I love Bobby Knuckles, we all do, but I just don't think he's good enough to get it done. That's no disrespect. I just think Adesanya is that damn good that you've got to be above that bar to get anywhere close to him. And at his perfect weight, which 185 is, I just don't think there is anyone there. The only fighter, and this is probably looking into 2023 realistically, the only fighter I think who can actually beat Israel Adesanya at middleweight is Alex Pereira. If he has a really good 2022, I could very much see that fight happening, notwithstanding the history that Pereira already has with Adesanya. I think that could happen. But Israel will still hold that belt in 2022. Of that, I am pretty confident. I think you're right. I think the only guy who could really give him a little bit of trouble is Sean Strickland. But I don't see Strickland doing enough to get that title shot even by the end of the year. He could, by all means, he could come out and shock everybody and fight 3-4 times. I just don't know if we'll see it. One guy I'd actually really like to see Sean Strickland fight is Darren Till. I'd really like to see that happen, because if he can get past Darren Till, then Sean Strickland's probably in that top 5. Admittedly, probably 5, but he is in that top 5 and he gets within striking range of a title fight. Realistically, though, I'm with you. I don't see that happening. And for 2022, Izzy is and still.
Yeah, I think Izzy's going to fight Rob and then maybe Jared Cannonier if he beats Brunson. But I think if Brunson wins, he might have to fight Strickland if he gets by Hermanson. There's a lot of moving parts in that division. I think that the fact that there's not a clear contender after Rob what does Izzy do with himself? Or like just pulling these guys out of thin air. I think it's going to be interesting to see what he actually does in 2022, because beyond Rob, I don't really see what the next move is, but I'm sure it'll present itself. You know, if Strickland goes and looks great against Jack Hermanson in Feb, I think it is, and he gets on the mic, he chats his crap, then he beats someone like Brunson, he could potentially get it. But yeah, I'm still picking Izzy. I think he will retain. And the next division, light heavyweight, is one I think we're going to see a lot of belt changes, at least a couple in 2022. I think Glover's going to struggle to hold on to that belt. You know, I'll keep writing him off every time I speak about him. I feel so bad about it, but there is a few killers coming up, and Jiri Prochaska looks like he's the guy getting the shot, and I think he'll just be a bit too relentless. You know, he's prime, he's ready to go, and then beyond that, I think Jiri might have problems holding on to the belt. He's got to face someone like Alexander Rakic, who personally I think is going to hold this belt by the end of the year. I don't think his style of late has been the most fan friendly, and I think the UFC are reluctantly going to give him a shot. But I think once he gets it, he will take advantage, and by the comes this time next year, we'll be speaking about him as champion, in my opinion.
Yeah, and 205 is a fascinating division because I think it's a bit like flyweight, and we're going to see a lot of title changes in it. We're certainly going to see a lot of infighting within 205 because obviously, you know, there isn't the authority of John Jones there anymore. And with Jan losing the title, it's kind of pie in the sky at this point. I think Yuri's going to be the champion by the end of 2022, but he's going to have a lot of stiff competition to fight off at the very top of that division. Alexander Rakic, I'm not the biggest fan of, but the guy's a very good fighter either way. I actually think there's going to be a real dark horse at the top of 205, and I think it's going to be Anthony Smith. A lot of people are looking past Anthony Smith and writing him off, but he's looked really good in this last couple of fights. Really, since that Jimmy Crute fight, I think it was at UFC 261, and perhaps a little bit before, Smith has done what Darren Till should have done, and he's really gotten his confidence back and he's gotten his momentum back. And I could see Smith making a title charge towards the end of the year as well. And let's not forget, Smith has got one thing that a lot of these guys don't. He does have title fight experience. All right, yes, he lost to John Jones, but he has experience under the bright lights. He's felt the pressure. He knows what to expect now. And so I'm not saying he will be, but if you wanted a real dark horse pick for title gold at 205, why not Anthony Smith?
He's got the name value to get a title shot. You know, he's definitely, I think, one more win away. So he could get in there by the end of the year. But for me, the reason I'm picking Rakic is because Jiří Procházka's style, it's exciting to watch, but at some point he is going to come up stuck, definitely. You know, even against Reyes, who he dominated, he still managed to, I think he admitted that he actually got knocked out, you know, in a fight he dominated. So I think Rakic is just going to be a bit too smart for him. And then beyond that, you've got someone like, say, Rakic has to defend against Smith, who he's already beaten, and he held him down, dominated him. That's where I'm leaning to, but I think Anthony Smith definitely will be a player. And as I said earlier, I really like what he's done. He's been really smart about building himself back off the feet. You know, nice fights for his pay, like same amount of pay. He's getting whatever. So you might as well take these easier fights, get your confidence back, and really build back momentum, which he has done. I think he'll definitely continue to do that in 2022. Will it be enough to get him a title shot? I'm not sure, but very excited to watch. I think light heavyweight is going to be all action in 2022. It's going to be fun. And just to finish us off, we've got the heavyweights, which, you know, we could see the title change hands in less than a month. We've got the interim champ, Ciryl Gane, going up against the heavyweight champ, Francis Ngannou. This is an interesting division in the fact that I think it's going to be one of these guys holding the belt, but it might not necessarily be the guy who wins the fight or who I think is going to win the fight, because Ngannou, his contract situation is up in the air right now at the UFC. I think even if he wins, he has one more defense and then he can technically leave the UFC. So what we could see happen is him win this fight and still end up relinquishing the belt down the line and leaving the UFC. It's a very real possibility at this point, especially when you look at the opportunities outside of the UFC right now in terms of, you know, boxing matches and all these things. That might be something to tempt him, and if he can get out of that UFC contract, he might go. So my ultimate pick for this, for various reasons, and it's not necessarily the person I think is going to win at UFC 270, but Ciryl Gane. I think even if he loses this fight, which for me is a 50-50, so he definitely can win it, even if he loses Ngannou, there is a good chance that he might actually leave the UFC, relinquish the belt, and Ciryl Gane, no doubt about it, is the next best thing at heavyweight. So he will be fighting for the vacant title, and he will win the vacant title. So another exciting division, definitely to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, heavyweight just got a whole lot more interesting with the Francis Ngannou contract situation. And I almost kind of want to talk about that a bit first, because that's what's making this fight so much more important. You know, as you said, Jordan, and you're absolutely right. I know you've been covering it a lot, actually. You know, this situation is getting quite ugly now with Ngannou's representatives and Dana White. And, you know, I'm not going to apportion blame because I have no idea who said what and who's done what. But it almost feels to me like Francis Ngannou's got the title and he's almost over-negotiating his hand now because he thinks this is YouTube boxing, and it isn't. Now, fighter pay and Dana White are all issues for another day. They can all be hotly debated one way or the other. But Ngannou has come out in the past, and Ngannou has said that, you know, he's having to borrow money to pay for training camps and all this kind of stuff. First of all, his activity level probably hasn't been as high as it should have been. As a champion, you should probably be fighting at least 2 or 3 times a year if you can. And secondly, this is almost becoming a financial management issue, I think, with Ngannou. I don't think this is a Dana White issue. I think this is an Ngannou issue because you're getting a base pay of $500,000 as the heavyweight champion, and you're getting pay-per-view points as well because you're the champion. So I'd actually be asking where his money's going. That, I mean, again, that probably isn't the question that's being asked, but it's the question I'm thinking of. I think this is much more a management issue than an actual personal beef between Ngannou and Dana White, and I think he's looking for someone to blame. But that brings us into the fight with Ciryl Gane and why it's so vital, because like you said, Ngannou fights Ciryl Gane, and then he has, I think, one more fight left on his contract, doesn't he? And then we are almost faced, and this is a totally different thing. I'm not trying to draw immediate parallels with it, but it's almost like CM Punk with the WWE back in the day, where you're faced with a situation where the champion walks out of your building with your title and the lineage is completely broken because he's not under contract with you anymore. And that's a big problem because Ngannou loses all his leverage if he loses to Ciryl Gane. And the overall point that I'm making here is that I think Ngannou is going to lose. I think Ngannou's got so much going on going into this fight that I just don't think his head's in the right place. And I think he's really underestimating how good Ciryl Gane truly is. They were obviously training partners quite a number of years ago, but I think Ciryl Gane is probably the best hybrid heavyweight we've seen since Cain Velasquez. That's how good I think Ciryl Gane truly is in terms of being quick, being strong, being tall, being able to do all of those things. I think Ciryl Gane is the perfect hybrid heavyweight. And I think this is all starting to get to Ngannou personally because, you know, Ngannou's coming out, he's making these comments about how he's not bothered, training footage has been doctored, he's coming out with all these different excuses. And yet Ciryl Gane's keeping his head down, training, doing his work and getting prepared for this fight. So personally, I think this whole situation is starting to get to Ngannou quite badly. And I think his head's all over the place at this point. I think he's going to go in. I think Ciryl Gane's going to win the title. And I think Ciryl Gane will be the heavyweight champion by the end of 2022. But then the Ngannou issue, I don't know what happens there because Dana White seems quite happy to make an example of Ngannou and just let him go. So if he goes, that's another storyline entirely to talk about. But staying on track with the main question, I think Ciryl Gane's the heavyweight champion by the end of next year.
Yeah, I do agree. From my understanding, what's going on with Ngannou's contract is this is his last fight on the contract. But if he wins, the UFC have an option to have his next fight because he's still the champion. I think there's some type of championship clause in the contracts which allows them to keep him for one more fight. But if he loses, he's free to go and do whatever he wants. But as you said, he loses all his cards, so he does really need to win this fight because for me, if he wins this fight, wins another. That Tyson Fury fight right there, Tyson Fury's been openly speaking about wanting to skip over his mandatory with Dylan White in favour of an exhibition or take an exhibition before that or a non-title fight. And if Francis Ngannou is a free agent, for me, that just it makes so much sense. And it seems far-fetched, but really in this situation, it is just a couple of minutes away from, you know, if Ngannou becomes a free agent, Tyson Fury's looking for an interim fight, boom, there you go. Just might as well print money. So I think Ngannou, whatever happens, I think he's going to leave the UFC. It's going to be very hard to repair that relationship now. So yeah, ultimately, win, lose, or draw in this fight, I think Ciryl Gane is going to hold the title by the end of 2022. But I just don't think. I think again we've got a situation where you've got this similar to middleweight, where this guy is the best, Ciryl Gane is the second best, and then there's a big, massive drop to everyone else in the division. So yeah, interesting fight, brilliant fight actually. I think Ngannou is being underpaid probably by the UFC and is underappreciated to even create an interim title off the back of what I picked as the performance of the year. I think was really unfair to Ngannou, and I'm not surprised he's got to be in his bonnet. But It's going to be great to see the fight and great to see how all this, political stuff plays out. But that pretty much sums us up. It was a long one. We got through everything. Thanks for joining me, Keelin. Anything you want to add?
Not really too much in the specifics, apart from it's been great to be on with you. Great to do this review. 2021 has been an amazing year, and it's probably set up an even better 2022 as well. We've got so much going on. It's almost like it's like a bloody drama TV show at this point. We have that many different sagas and storylines going on. I'm just really excited to see it. I think the first couple of months, especially with everything we've just talked about, are really going to set the trend for where 2022 goes, because we've got some huge fights. We have Moreno Figueiredo, we've got Ngannou Gan, we've got big fights in every division coming up. We have Beneil Dariush, Islam Makhachev. So the tone and the pace for 2022 are really going to be set in the first quarter of this year. And I got to be honest, man, I'm just so excited to see it all, because I think we're in line for a real roller coaster year.
Yeah, and I think that the UFC's decision to carry on through the pandemic has really paid dividends, because while everyone else stopped, the UFC was the only thing on the TV. And I think the sport, MMA as a whole, thanks to the UFC, has become so much bigger over the last year or two, just because of what the UFC have been able to do. So credit to them. And definitely covering the sport from my side, I'm seeing that, as a writer and someone who sees, how much traffic comes into our site. It's ridiculous how much it's grown throughout the pandemic. So just unfortunate I personally haven't had the chance to get any events lately. So hopefully that changes in 2022. But I don't think anything's going to change in terms of the standard of MMA, the brilliant fights that are getting put on week in, way out by the UFC, and all kinds of different promotions. It's really getting exciting now. And once again, thanks for joining me, Keelin. It's been great chatting. 2021 was a great year. Hopefully 2022 delivers. And we'll see you all next year for another one of these breakdowns. Thanks.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKickMMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.